Astăzi era vorba că vorbim de cum ar trebui să se lucrurile fundamentale care totdeauna cel mai greu de vorbit, și anume cum ar trebui să se așeze lucrurile în travaliu și cum ar trebui, ce înțelegem prin travaliul fiziologic și ca urmare, dacă înțelegem cât de cât și un travaliu fiziologic, atunci cum să-l urmărim mai bine și mai bine. Pentru că dacă avem teamă de ceva, avem teamă că după ce ne-am concentrat 9 luni, sper, în cel mai bun scenariu, să ducem pe cineva până la capăt, totul se reduce de după la sfârșit. Și deci, întotdeauna, eu o să vorbesc super scurt numai ca să pun un pic în contextul local. Știm că atunci când ne apucăm să vorbim despre un subiectul de astăzi fiind monitorizarea travaliului, trebuie să știm, monitorizăm la cu ce scop. Scopul actuării este să scoatem copii buni la sfârșit, și asta o să fie și unul din întrebările pe care o să o pun la sfârșit, și anume ce înseamnă un copil bun. Adică care sunt cu adevărat parametrii la care te uiți, nu fi doar abdarul, care, de exemplu, în maternitatea mea e mereu mic, pentru că ne-am foarte mândri că se vede. În timp ce știm maternități în care ne ducem și acum ia copilul 10 și peste 10 zile intubat, că trebuie să ia tot 10, că ăsta e un alt ca și deci, care ar fi protocoalele de management? Și despre acest subiect o să vorbească mai mult Jacky Nizard, pentru că se pare că chiar și când ne hotărâm că a început cu adevărat un travaliu și cât de mult durează acest travaliu, e o chestie care e controversată. Și acum, unde e contextul local, este că aș vrea astăzi când vorbim, în primul rând să nu vorbim din perspectiva medicinei defensive. Vai, ce ne facem, cum ne apărăm, că așa dacă ne apărăm de travaliu, facem ce de la toată lumea și ne-am terminat. Și am încercat ca urmare să mă uit, totuși cu realism așa, care sunt protocoalele care sunt în vigoare acum pentru noi ăștia, de practicăm în București, în România, nu știu ce. Unul din lucrurile surprinzătoare este că avem protocoale care sunt într-un ordin al Ministerului Sănătății, care este ordinul de monitorizare a sarcinii, care a fost făcut prin anii 90, care este atât de vechi încât nu mai găsești în nicio formă digitală. Dacă îl cauți la IOMC, la IML, la nu știu ce, tot de la el și aduce vag aminte că există, dar nu îl au pe hârtie. Și ca urmare, chiar și când se judecă cazuri medico-legale, nu se mai raportează la chestia aia, ci se raportează la ultimul tratat. Ăia de la IML, asta nu mai așa, pentru că de 3 zile cer să-l găsesc și nu l-am găsit. Cei de la IML încă mai se uită în tratatul ăla verde de obstetrică. Lumea care își dă acum examenele, de fapt, învață din alți tratați și deci dacă cu adevărat cauți protocolul, dacă cu adevărat cauți protocolul, practic nu-l găsești. Am vrut să vă pun o poză cu foaia noastră de observație și toate căsuțele pe care trebuie să le completez, pe care nu știu dacă le completează cineva. Practic, la ora asta, ghidurile noastre sunt așa, că dacă ai o primipară, durata totală ar trebui să nu fie peste 12 ore, dacă ai o multipară, ar trebui să nu fie peste 8 ore, astea sunt, că trebuie să-i faci un tușeu la 3 ore, asta ar veni în secundar cu obligația cu ce scrii în timpul travaliului, plus un tușeu când se rupe apa, și că trebuie să-i monitorizezi contracțiile și bătăile în jur, dar nu e clar din cât în cât timp, se știe așa cumva informal că ar trebui să descrie la 30 de minute. Cine are altă părere să-mi zică, dar cam așa e. Deci noi, teoretic, când urmărim un travaliu, ar trebui să avem un consemnat, odată la 30 de minute BCF-uri, CUD-uri, odată la 3 ore un tact, dacă se rupe apa un tact, cam asta sunt protocoalele curente. Și, deci, ăsta ne e contextul local. Folosește cineva de pe aici bishop-uri? Să le și consemneze? Deci, practic, bishop-uri voi folosiți? Și le scrieți? Pe bishop nu știu că? Unde practicați?
Cadrul și cadrul.
Am înțeles, ok. So to sum it up and to turn on to English is that in our current practice we don't have a regulation that is known by everybody, but the general practice is that we write it down during labor. Labor should not be more than 12 hours for the premipar and 8 hours for the rest. We write down vaginal examination every 3 hours. And once when the membranes rupture, we write down the stages of the cardiac rhythm and the frequency
on
of
the partogram.
On the partogram. And everything is written. We don't have, in most of the places there is nothing graphic.
There's no chart.
There's no chart.
Okay.
We don't, as a current practice, we don't use bishops. It's only one in the room and it's for the private practice that was right down the bishop's part.
So what do you use to monitor labor progress? Just the dilation, cervical dilation?
So it's the progression of the dilation and the progression of the presentation of the station.
Okay.
But they are written down. You don't use
Right.
charts
I understand.
to cross them or whatever. Basically this is it. And I don't think there is no current practice into monitoring without labor.
There's no continuous
monitoring in most of the places. În ce voi faceți continuu? Polițul face continuu? De când? Nu de alta, dar... So we switched to the big places switched to continuous monitoring for the past 5 years.
Okay.
Okay.
That's interesting.
So that's the
My turn?
and I switch it to you.
Okay, so the way you work is probably going to change. And I'm going to bring you data that is not very recent. Some is not very recent. Some is extremely recent. On what is normal labor, and don't worry if it comes as a surprise to you, because it came as a surprise to everybody. The data I'm going to show you is already standard care in some countries. I lost my presentation. So some data that I'm going to show you is already standard care and already national guidelines in some country, but not yet all countries. And the idea for me today is to bring you information that will help you modify the way you're working the same way we are currently modifying the way we're working. So, the problem is that obstetrics, we all think it's an art. We all work differently, and if we consider that obstetrics is a science, then we need to standardize, and we need to use very strong and reliable data. Obstetric has been built over the years, but what you're working on, the methodology you're using now, is a methodology that is 60 years old actually. It all started with Friedman, Emanuel Friedman, in the 50s, who decided to monitor regularly cervical dilation, and then eventually put the monitoring on a curve, design a curve, and then define what is normal. Once you have a curve, you can say this is a normal curve and this is abnormal. So he designed curves with stages and phases, and then eventually it has been decided that abnormal progression is less than 1.2 or 1.5 centimeters per hour in nulliparous or multiparous women, and that if for 2 consecutive hours, if there's no progression and normal contractions and everything else normal, of course, but if for 2 consecutive hours, if there's no progression, you call this non-progressive labor and you're allowed to do a cesarean section non-progressively. Is that what you do? Yes? No? How long do you wait? 4 hours. Okay. 4, the other ones 4 as well? Okay, good. But all of this, I mean, we're talking about the 50s, the 60s, and early 70s for some publications. This is very old. So all of this comes from a time where they were not using good citizen. It comes from a time where there was no epidural and no CTG. I'm not even talking about continuous or discontinuous. I mean, in the 50s, there were no CTGs that did not exist. So what we define as normal and abnormal comes from a time where everything was different. Moreover, we don't have the same patients. It can vary from one country or one place to another, but overall, our from patients 60 years ago, are a bit older and a bit heavier than what they used to be. So it's a real challenge. So is what we know, what we work on now, is it still true from the data that is very old data and that has not been challenged? So there was one first paper that was published in 2002, which was the first step to a larger paper that I'm going to present to you. And that first paper, just in two slides, you can see here, so Zhang is the first author, okay? Zhang is the guy who published the most on normal labor in the past years. And the biggest paper I'm going to present to you is a paper where he's first author.
And it's from
The United States. It's not because he's called Zhang that
he's Chinese.
he's Chinese, but it's from the States. Okay. He works in the States. So you see here, the dotted line is Friedman 55, 1955, 60 years ago. Yeah, 60 years ago. And then Friedman, he published a lot. So then you have 78, where he showed that, well, the first phase could be complicated, well, it could be slower. And then Zhang paper came. So Zhang paper, it's on 1,300 militaris women. And he says, well, look, the curves are not what we thought they were. Look how they are. They're completely different. They're a bit flatter, then they're faster. Well, there's some modification. We'll come back to this. And then Zhang pursued, and he showed that, well, if you put the two curves, they look something like this. They don't cross at the zero, but okay. This is what we had. This is the information we had in 2002. Nobody really read that paper. But that paper was the first step to the second one, because the second paper is the largest study, and it's the one that's huge study, huge database, and that's the one we're working on. And this is the study that is used to change national guidelines now. And national guidelines have changed throughout the world, and they keep on changing according to this paper that was published 7 years ago, in 2010. And you see there are a lot of authors because it's a very big study, and Zhang is the first author. It's the same Zhang from the first paper. So what is the study? The study is a retrospective observational study. They have a database, and they could look into the database. It's a database that comes from 19 hospitals in the United States. It ranges over a period of 7 years, from 2002 to 2008. But most of the data are collected at the end. And it's important because most of the data is on a compact period of time, which is good for us. I mean, it gives validity to the data, more validity to the data. So that database accounts for more than 200,000 deliveries. So they could go into the database and get some information, and in there they use more than 60,000 deliveries for the current paper. So we're talking about data on 60,000 births. So I don't know how many births you have per year in Bucharest, for instance, but that starts to be a lot. How many births do you have in Romania?
It's 180,000
per year. So it's like 1/3 of all the births in one database that you can exploit and look into. And when they look at the 60,000, it's because they were looking at low risk, normal outcome. So what is low risk, normal outcome? spontaneous labor, spontaneous labor, cephalic presentation, no prematurity, singleton. The outcome was vaginal delivery, so we already know it's a selected population with a normal outcome, and normal outcome for the mother and normal outcome for the baby. Normal Apgar score, normal pH. Everybody in the data that I'm going to show you, everybody is healthy. And it's important because you might be surprised by some figures, but everybody is healthy. So how did they proceed? First, they had their big database, over 200,000 patients. Then they excluded multiples, they excluded preterm, postterm, stillbirth, induction or cesarean section, non-vertex, cesarean deliveries during labor. They extracted all of this. Then you had to have a good Apgar score, no congenital abnormality, no birth injuries. You should not go into neonatal intensive care, and you should be healthy. So we have a clean population. And who are these women? So these women, you can see there's a nulliparous, primiparous, and multiparous. So obviously maternal age increases with parity. Obvious. Can you all see the figures? Yeah. The body mass index, that's not a surprise to anybody. It increases with parity also. And on average, you keep some weight from previous pregnancies and age. And the body mass index in the women at delivery was high for all of them, which is also normal. When you look at cervical dilation, and that's important at the entry. So women were between 4 and 5 centimeters when they entered the labor ward. I don't know what's the case here. I have the impression in France they entered the labor ward much earlier. That's also a problem with room management, but there were 4 or 5 centimeters. The cervix was, the effacement was high, and the station was -1, -2 at admission in the labor ward. Finally, when we look at the use of oxytocin, roughly half of them had oxytocin during labor. Epidural was, these are the states rates between 70 and 80%, and the number of vaginal examination between 4 and 5 per labor. What's your epidural rate here? Do you know?
It depends where you are.
Yeah.
So it's from 0 to almost everybody.
Okay. Okay. So in the data that I'm going to show you.
But I'll ask around.
Yeah.
So it's 30% university center, and there's only 5% not a big one.
Okay.
I would say ours is also 1 in 4, probably. Municipal, there's one big university center where the anesthesiologists refuse, so there is none.
Okay.
But they have a public university hospital, and their C-section rate is 83%. So,
Well, that means everybody gets something. Anyway, so you see, and the operative delivery, operative vaginal delivery, 12% in primiparous, and then 5% or less than 5% in multiparous women, which is average. So what they looked at the time these women in labor took to gain 1 centimeter in cervical dilation. How much time do you take to go from 5 to 6 centimeters? How much time do you take to go from 6 to 7, from 7 to 8, from 8 to 9, etc.? And what they looked at, and remember, it's all normal vaginal delivery, normal outcome for babies and mothers. And what they looked is at the average, and then at the 95th centile. So what is the 95th centile of the time to gain 1 centimeter when the outcome is normal? You all got that straight? Because afterwards we're all going to see figures and figures and figures. So
what is the longest time that it takes?
Well, what is the average to gain 1 centimeters, and what is the, because the average has a confidence interval, and what is the 95th centile of that extra centimeter to gain. And here it is. Here it is. So you can see that, for instance, from 4 to 5 centimeters, I'm going to get a bit further away from the microphone, that's right. From 4 to 5 centimeters, on average, when it's your first labor, you take 1.3 hours, and the 95th centile is 6 hours. Yes, that's why I told you tomorrow you're working differently. This is normal outcome. Remember, huh? I have to repeat that because it's 6 hours. Yeah, 6 hours. And then you have for previous. Look for primiparous and multiparous women to get from 4 to 5. The 95th centiles is longer. And then when you say okay. But when does labor starts to go faster? Because you consider that labor goes faster. When labor goes faster, you call that second stage, right? So when is second stage? And we all were taught second stage is 3 centimeters, or it's quite early. Actually, second stage is 6 centimeters. So you only active. So you get into active phase at 6 centimeters, which is very late. What's the implication? That means that if she's very, very, very slow to get, and she's not yet at 6 centimeters, you have time. There's no rush. But then, once she passed 6 centimeters, then she should go faster. And that's important. And you can see it here. You see the average? Here, this is a median. I said average, but it's median. The median, once you pass 6 centimeters, 6 centimeters, is less than 1 hour. And when you look at the 95th centile, you're less than 2 hours in primiparous women. And then you see in nulliparous, and then in primiparous and in multiparous, it's a bit faster, but not that fast. So that's important because that redefines all the phases during labor. Everything is new when you look at this. There's another way to look at it. The other way to look at it is when you're admitted, let me get that straight. This is very difficult to read, but when you're admitted at 3 centimeters, 3 or 3.5, how long do you take to go to 6? So you take on median time is 4 hours, but it can go up to 12 hours to get to 6 centimeters and still normal. So when you tell me that normal labor should not last more than 12 hours, I tell you no. Normal labor can last much longer. So in France, we use paper partograms and it's graphs. And so we have a double page graph, right? And we used to say that when labor is really slow, you have the third page syndrome because you had to scotch another page. And now they all have third pages. Well, not all, but many of them. I mean, to have a third page is very common now that we respect these new data. And you can look at it here because the graph, the colored graph is just the same thing put into a graph. And you can see that once you're admitted, how much time do you take to, and it's just the same thing. So, if you want to look at it in another way, if you admit a woman at 3 centimeters, how much time does it take her to go to full dilatation? 3 centimeters, full dilatation. On average, 7 hours, up to 17 hours, and she hasn't delivered yet. She's only fully dilated. There's still the rest of the labor to go. Okay? So this is important. The team plotted some charts, and these are charts that you can use. They're not commonly put into practice, these charts. What is put in practice is what I just showed you before, the time, the median, and the 95th centile. This is the national guidelines in the United States, and it's the national guidelines in many countries now. And it's growing everywhere. This is the graph put into a graph, and you can see that if you admit a patient a nulliparous patient, if you admit her at 4 centimeters, the median time to get to full dilation would be 6 centimeters. But that's only the median time, because on this graph there is no 95th centile. Okay? This is non-scarred uterus, cephalic presentation, no prematurity, everybody healthy. Now, what happens if you look at women who have had a history of cesarean section? They have a scarred uterus. And they did something that is quite similar, so it's still the same team, actually, because they are the ones working on that database. So it's still the same team. The authors are a bit different, but you still have Zhang as last author. So it's the same methodology. So they use the same methodology, same centers, the same database, but the population is a bit different, because now they've included induced labor. So it's not only spontaneous labor, it's also induction of labor. And in some of their data, there's also the cesarean section performed during labor. So it's not only normal outcome. And what I'm going to show you, some of the graphs have also cesarean section during labor. And it ranges from 37 to 42 weeks. So what can we see? So you have TOLAC, trial of labor after cesarean. You're comfortable with that? TOLAC. And then you have nulliparous women. So, and it's important because the TOLAC population, it's women who have had a cesarean section and never delivered normally before or after. So it's their second pregnancy. Do you understand? One cesarean, never delivered normally, and they're into labor. So they've never proven that it could deliver vaginally, to put it simply. So when you look, is there a difference in the population? Obviously there's a difference, because one is multiparous, the other one is nulliparous. So while they're a bit older, they're less white. The BMI they're a bit heavier. They're also a bit older. Weight comes with age. The gestational age at delivery is almost the same. It doesn't make much difference. And obviously with BMI and with age comes more diabetes, comes a bit more of pathology, but just a bit more of pathology. Less preeclampsia because they're multiparous. It's not their first pregnancy. So a bit less preeclampsia, and so on and so forth. When you look at the cervical dilation at admission, it's a bit different. It's a confidence interval that changes, and the effacement as well. When you compare these two populations once more, when you look at station, well, the station is a bit different. It doesn't show because there are thousands of patients. So whenever there's a difference at third figure after the comma, it's statistically different, but it's -2 on average for both. The epidural rate it's not the same, but we're around 50%, and the induction rate is also different. Okay, and you see that oxytocin is widely used, because some people say that you should not use oxytocin on scarred uterus. Most people use it. I don't know if you use it. You use oxytocin?
We use it like all the time, but we rarely have scarred uterus.
Okay, so you might read that people don't use oxytocin on scarred uterus. It's false. We all do. And the cesarean section rate, you see they have 19% in this nulliparous population, and they're almost 60% in TOLAC. It's normal to have a higher rate of cesarean section in TOLAC. I'm not going to go into discussion, is a 60% higher or not, but it's normal to have a higher rate. So what is surprising is that when you look at the dilation and the time to delivery, do you understand that graph? This is only for women who delivered vaginally. So when the outcome is a vaginal delivery, the message here is that progression is similar whether you have or not a scarred uterus. And remember, we just saw how slow it could be. When we look here at, again, it's the same authors, so the methodology is the same. Median, 95th centile. When we look at median and 95th centile, and I just want to make sure that okay. When you look in the Tolac and the nulliparous, you can see that the figures are very similar, and they did wait a long time. Look at the 4 to 5. Go from 4 to 5 centimeters with a scarred uterus. They waited up to 12 hours. That is not something we're used to. When we say a scarred uterus, everything should go on fast. That's not something we're used to. Okay? But you can see that it can take, and from 4 centimeters to full dilation, it can take on average from 6 to 7 hours, and you can see that the 95th centile is around 26 hours, which honestly is very, very long for a scarred uterus. We're not used to these figures. You are not used to it at all because you don't do that. You know, very few, but even for us, where we deliver these patients vaginally, it's very long. When we look at does the epidural make a difference? You got data second stage with epidural and second stage without epidural, and you can see that it's about the same. It's statistically different but the difference is minute. So it's about the same, and that without epidural you deliver faster. The second stage is faster without epidural, but that's obvious. You push better. Without epidural, you push better, and it's faster. When we consider here those who delivered vaginally between both, and here the message that the author wants to show is that it might be a bit slower up to 7 centimeters. You see, the curves don't look the same up to 7 centimeters, but once you reach 7 centimeters, it's the same speed. I mean, so you might be a bit slower in the beginning of labor when you have a scarred uterus, but from 7 upwards, it should behave like a normal uterus.
It's okay.
Okay, good. So this is data that is important because the data on normal uterus, the first paper from the big paper from Zhang, that's new data, and when that came out from new data for us. And the second paper on scarred uterus, that you should behave the same way with scarred uterus, is also new data for us. We were much less patient on scarred uterus than we were on non-scarred uteruses. And then came the other question: is when there's a rupture membrane and you induce with oxytocin, how long can you push with oxytocin before saying it's a failure of induction? What's your gut feeling? You got a patient, she ruptured her membrane, or you ruptured her membrane, whatever. You put oxytocin, right? You use oxytocin to give her contractions. You got contractions, you got a ruptured membrane, you got oxytocin running. How long can you stay like this before calling it a failure and doing a cesarean section? Come on, give me some figures. Yes, normal contractions. You're satisfied with the contractions? 4 hours. 4 hours, everybody? You're all at 4 hours?
I would say less.
2 hours, 4 hours. Okay.
Yeah.
So they had looked into that. That's another American paper. It's not exactly the same team, but it's another American paper because they're the ones who have the nice databases to work on. And what they did, this is a more recent paper, and it's a paper from 2016, so it's much more recent. So they have looked, well, I don't know what's your induction rate here, you know? The induction rate? 35? Okay, good. 35%. So you have to look at, if you induce a lot, this is important data for you. So what is a failure? For ACOG, it was written that the cesarean delivery for failure of induction of labor in the latent phase can be avoided by, well then you put some, you put some oxytocin, you rupture the membrane, you do all the things we do, that's our job. And then requiring that oxytocin be administered for at least 12 to 18 hours after membrane rupture before deeming the induction of failure. That's what was written, but this was written with very, very little data to support it. So what the authors wanted to look, it says, we have a good database, we're going to look now if this is true, because we don't know if this is true. So they did something similar. They used a retrospective database where patients are included where they're at least 28 weeks pregnant. It's the same period of time from 2002 to 2008, the same hospitals, the same number of births, it's the same database, right? And then they concentrated on singleton, cephalic presentation, more than 37 weeks pregnancy, ruptured the membrane plus oxytocin. The entry point is you needed both to start counting. You put the timer up when you have both, ruptured and oxytocin. And then the limit was before active phase, because we're talking about latent phase, right? If you say I have a failure of induction, that means that you didn't reach active phase. And since this is a paper from 2016, the active phase definition is 6 centimeters. So they say, how long can you give oxytocin to a woman who have ruptured her membranes before she reaches 6 centimeters? Good. Well, there were some exclusions which were patient in whom you're not ready to wait that long. That's obvious. So these were put apart. They didn't include them, and they ended up with 18,000 pregnancies. And they divided them in premature rupture, so they ruptured spontaneously. Medically indicated rupture, you decided to rupture, and on demand. The patient wanted an induction on demand. So I told you T0, when you start, it's when you have both the rupture and the oxytocin, and the active phase is 6 centimeters. And the data is surprisingly interesting. So then, but if before we go there, what are the risks of waiting too long for the baby? What are the risks of waiting too long? It's easy. Infection, okay? And what is the risk for the mother? Well, there's infection, but sorry? Well, that's the infection, but there's another risk also for the mother, which is specific to the mother. Hemorrhage. So they're going to look at chorioamnionitis and hemorrhage, and they're going to see where it falls. And that's exactly what we see here. You have chorioamnionitis. So in group A, it's the latent phase, and in group A, it's the nulliparous, and in group B is the multiparous. And you can have in dark, you have the latent phase. That's what we're interested in, the dark columns. Nowadays, medicine has changed, and one of our tasks as doctors and midwives is to, once a patient gets into the labor ward, is she at high risk or low risk? We don't behave the same way. All the data I showed you are data on low risk. So don't take this to granted for a patient with a type 1 diabetes. It's not true. Okay? That would be a mistake, and that would be dangerous. So when the fetus and the mother are doing well, labor can last much longer, and that's a good point. Another message, take-home message, is that active phase starts at 6 centimeters. That's a big news. That was big news throughout the world. And if you use oxytocin and the membranes are ruptured, probably that the threshold before getting into active labor of 12 hours is the good one to use and for labor management. So what does that say? That says that management of first stage is extremely important. And obviously the first stage we have to be very, very, very patient. Ideally, not bring them in the labor ward. But that's complicated because if you say you don't get into the labor ward before 6 centimeters, which is quite late, then you might get into trouble with your pain management. That's an issue for us, for example.
So your rate is?
Our epidural rate is very high, it's around 100%. So and we have patient arriving, you know, they're barely 2 centimeters, and they say, "Can I have my epidural now?" And we say, "But are you in pain?" Well, not yet, but it's a bit difficult.
I just want to say
Yeah,
that
please.
your context is particular. În faza peridurală a devenit drept în ceva din 1994-97, pentru că faza era foarte reglementată și totul se duce prin decret. Atunci există decretul care spune că peridurala nu este după ordonanță, ci pe, dacă e cerută, e pe obligația spitalului să-ți o dea. Și atunci, din momentul respectiv, toate spitalele ar trebui să se organizeze cu ceea ce noi avem. Anesteziști, asistenți de anestezie, nu poate, deci sunt în poziția legală, că dacă cineva vine și zice vreau peridurală, nu trebuie să-mi dea. Din cauza asta, au rate de peridurală de până la 100%, numai moașele cele mai doritoare, ca ele însele să dea din cauza de infecție care naște natural, poate primie ca să poată să contestească mai nasă natural sau cineva care vine la completă. Și deci asta face ca să fie foarte particulară. I was just saying this, if somebody asks, you have to.
No, and since our epidural rate is very high, every woman has a consultation with an anesthesiologist during pregnancy. You probably don't have that.
We do have it in the private practices.
Right. No, for us it's compulsory for everybody. So the idea would be then a later admission in the labor ward, because I mean with these new data we didn't get extra labor ward rooms. I mean, if you're going to keep women for extra hours in the labor room, you need more room. But we don't have more rooms, so the idea would be to admit them a bit later then. And that's complicated because that means information during pregnancy. And during pregnancy, explaining to them that we're going to offer them to go into labor room later. They can walk up the stairs, they can walk outside if they want, they can take a bath, we have a bathtub for that. Just for them to enter the labor room a bit later. It's hard, huh? Another challenge is to make sure it's low risk, so you don't make mistakes. You have to look at the file, the medical file, and make sure you're dealing with low risk, because everything I showed you does not apply if it's a high risk pregnancy. And if you do all of this, if you do it properly, you should reduce your cesarean section rate. Mathematically, you should reduce your cesarean section rate. I haven't seen yet data sets that have evaluated on a large scale once you implement these new guidelines but we're still waiting for them, but that's where it should go. So that's what I wanted to bring to you, and I'm gonna just put as a last slide before discussion the most important one, which is this one. Thank you very much. So it's never instantaneous transition. That never exists. You don't go from one way of working to 100% of people working differently. That doesn't exist. So we're in the midst of a transition in my department, and so we're trying to respect the 6 centimeters per active phase. That's complicated because it used to be 3, you know. So we have to, and teams are large teams. You got a lot of people are turning. Sometimes it's a gynae surgeon who's on duty, and he says, "Wow, what's that 6 centimeters? I've never heard about it." It's a bit complicated, but we're moving slowly. So we're respecting now. Almost all of us are respecting the 6 centimeters active phase, and but we're not yet strictly respecting the 90%. That is difficult.
So when a newly car comes and she's 3 or 4 centimeters.
That's interesting. That's interesting.
What do you do with her? You just wait for the house?
No. Well, you see, 3 is 8 hours to get to 4. That's a 90% path. The idea is not to start the partogram.
It's a good one because we don't like partogram. We don't like to write and write.
No, if you start the partogram, then you find time very long. So we try to tell them, you know, go and walk in the park because we got a very nice garden in our hospital. Go and walk in the garden. Come back in an hour. You know, we try to, because as soon as she would go in the labor ward in a bed. She will ask for an epidural, and she will ask, and then she will occupy that room for 15, 18 hours. That's an issue for us. That's a very big problem for us. We only have 5 rooms now for 2.5 thousand deliveries. So I don't know how that talks to you, but if every patient uses the room for 18 hours, it's going to be complicated. So the idea is to try to put them a bit later. It's difficult, but to put them a bit later. If she gets into labor, and if let's say she's very painful and she needs an epidural, then we try to respect that. For real. We try. Unless, of course, there's an abnormal CTG or anything other that happens. Because here, it's all the ones who stayed normal. Obviously, there are many for which something happened. They start having fever, they start having fetal tachycardia, they start having blood pressure that goes up. It's not in this data set.
Yeah, 2 questions. Actually, it's 1. You said in France, everybody has the right to ask for epidural. Okay? And you said the moment that you rupture the membrane or it's ruptured spontaneously and you administer the oxytocin infusion, if there is not a progression 12 hours, so it's better. Okay, shouldn't it be different between someone who has a epidural and someone who doesn't? So, someone who doesn't, it should be shorter, right? Or no, that should happen.
Well,
Based on what you said that epidural, the woman can...
pain management is much more difficult. Well, 12 hours is much more difficult without epidural. I agree. But it's not. It's not, because when you look at the data set, I didn't put it to you. No, but I didn't put the graph into this paper. But there were. It's about the same thing. You had 50% without epidural. personally, but I'm a man, so it's a bit different. But 12 hours, 12 hours with ruptured membrane and excision without epidural is a long time. But it's a long time on pain management. We're not talking about complications. So, do you do an earlier cesarean section because you're not managing pain?
Sometimes yes.
Or when you feel it's not human not to give an epidural because it's going to last 12 hours, do you put an epidural?
We consider the failure of operation shorter, like in the college say 4 hours.
There's the epidural modifies the second stage when you push. It doesn't modify before. Yes, it's a different story. It's when you start from fully dilated to birth, it's shorter without epidural, but before it doesn't make a difference. Before the challenge is pain management. Do you use something else than epidural for pain management here?
There are some.
Like one
Yeah, we have
Antonox. Okay, so you do have Antonox. Okay.
Antonox is not actually Antonox they introduced is a new thing.
Okay.
So first we had the classical management was with opioids.
Okay. That's not very good for the baby.
Yeah, I know, but so it was some opioids, and then epidurals were put into place.
Right.
And a few years ago, the Antonox Center is a new thing. So we had epidurals before and
Yeah, ketamine is a very old drug that
yes,
has been used.
we've seen it.
We still use ketamine for patients who have a very high risk of problem with hemodynamic modification, because when you put an epidural, you can have a drop in blood pressure, and when you absolutely don't want this, ketamine is a good drug actually. Yeah, it's a good drug. But Antonox is a good solution, and it's also fun because everybody gets some in the room. Even those who are doing the delivery, you get a bit of it. Okay, so now what I showed you, it's a bit of a tricky question, but you can answer honestly. Are you going to change your practices or not? Or you're going to consider that it's not adaptable, it's not appropriate for here? That's where nobody answers. Yes, please. I don't know if you have guidelines on normal labor because we didn't have any. And we're going to have our first guidelines on normal labor now because it's very difficult to define normal labor. But I haven't seen them yet, and I'm a reviewer, so I'm going to get to correct them before. But obviously, our guidelines are going to get close to this. That's good. But if it's a challenge and it's a necessity to have guidelines on normality as well, because normality should be the majority of the cases, right? So we need guidelines on the majority of the cases.
And I think it's the most complicated to get people to agree on normality. So that's why we don't have guidelines. And I have a
stage that as well in the stage the woman is coming at the hospital at 37 because the practitioner scheduling her and you want to keep with the peridural no matter of her cervical status, and then we induce her because it was on plan, and then she can go back with all the family after 24 hours because this was scheduled, she gets the peridural, she gets the
But that's not obstetrics.
no, but this was the stage where government was working. So this was the then part, so we did it normal, but this was the era. Now the woman, they said, don't let you to be induced before 39, March of times. So this was another, we didn't have it.
without rupture of membranes on somebody in the labor.
Okay, when do you put oxytocin in unruptured membranes on spontaneous labor?
Yes.
We just had guidelines that actually we had in January the first guidelines from the midwives. It's the first time the midwives in France publish their own guidelines, and it was exactly on that, and on management of oxytocin in spontaneous labor. And the idea is to put it much later than we used to. The conclusion was we use oxytocin in spontaneous labor. We use oxytocin too early and too much. And so they want to, if the baby and the mother are doing well, they want to delay the initiation of oxytocin and rupture of membrane.
So let me rephrase. You do have cases and guidelines on women who are in the labor ward coming in spontaneous labor,
Right,
who have intact membranes,
right,
and at some point they need oxytocin and they have their oxytocin perfusion,
okay.
although they have intact membranes. So, with,
Well,
or does it go in the same?
no, in our practice, I can tell you, because I don't remember exactly when. I don't have that figure in my head, but I find there's always a problem by putting oxytocin without rupturing the membranes.
But do you find it yourself that does it? I'm telling you why, because I had
I'm going to look at the guidelines at the same time. Go ahead.
As a Romanian resident coming
Right.
to France,
Right.
one of the first surprises. The first surprise was that in the labor ward was silence. Nobody shouted. That was and the second one was that you put oxytocin on intact membranes, while here it was dogma that you never do that.
Okay.
That first you have ruptured membranes and very brutally some advanced dilatation and then oxytocin.
I don't have it, unfortunately. And I get your point. I get your point very well. No, I'm sorry. I don't have the guidelines. You never put. What do you do here? You never put. You always rupture the membranes.
Most of the time you are in that situation. As București put it, you always have rupture membrane because you never were in a hurry. So you usually add rupture membranes too. But still, in the 90s, when I was told sort of you should never do that. You were not explained why. But it was a bit of a message that you should first be in a situation of rupture membranes and then initiate.
Because there's the active management of labor. There's also that big trend of active management of labor is that if you want to manage labor, you have to rupture, put oxytocin, and then she delivers. We were also brought up like this. Well, actually, it's not that simple. It's not that rupture. Yeah, rupture. But do you ever have 12 hours of labor with unruptured membrane? I don't think so. That seems very, very long of real labor with unruptured membrane. 12 hours.
Do you manage obese patients with
we try to, but there's very often something that happens. because you know there are higher risk of abnormal CTG, higher risk of, but we try to. We don't differentiate this. We try to apply it to obese patient, but it does stress the team very much because the longer the partogram is, the more the team sees that we're going to do an emergency cesarean section in a very obese patient in the middle of the night, and nobody's happy with this. But I try to force them to do like everybody else. No, they're not. That's all right. We're never happy. In France, the practice is continuous CTG, and remember that in country where it's discontinuous CTG, the contraindication for discontinuous CTG is epidural. When you have an epidural, you should always have a continuous CTG. And the new FIGO guidelines that came in 2015 on the CTG, one of the contraindication of intermittent CTG or discontinuous CTG is epidural. So we don't very often have the opportunity to offer discontinuous CTG because they all have epidural.
And which are the cases where you use, or if you ever use intrauterine
Scalp electrode?
No, total sensors.
Never. Almost never.
So even for the very obese ones,
When I say almost never, that means that there would be a very obese patient once or twice a year, but even in very obese patients, sometimes you're not trying to record the intensity, you know, with the topometry. It's only the frequency. So the intensity doesn't make any sense. So if you record, even if it's just a little bit, it's enough. If you really cannot record anything and you're increasing the citizen, then sometimes the midwife will put an internal total pressure monitor, but she doesn't ask us, she just does.
so you don't know how frequently.
You know, I know because I review every file every morning, and it's almost never. And I know that because they do have a cost, and I know that we almost never buy them.
And you don't think they bring anything plus for scarlet?
No, so we have guidelines not to use it in scarlet uterus. The FIGO guidelines say that you don't have to use an internal topometry in scarlet uterus. That's the FIGO guidelines from October 2015.
So you are not obliged to, but if you are in the luxury of having one, you think it's better? Or
Nope.
no check?
No. The FIGO guidelines say don't do. There were some very rare accidents described, by pushing the catheter inside the uterus. So they said there's no use. You use it very often here?
No, I think if it works.
Okay, so don't change.
Don't buy it.
Don't change. Don't buy. Don't spend money there. It's not worth it.
You're already bought it.
You have to go back to the old Romanian obstetrics.
I thought operation something.
You said a presentation for science?
Yeah.
Oh, a perforation. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, there were some accidents described, and it doesn't bring much because at one point, you know, it all comes from the Montevideo score. Remember that? Did you ever use it? Oh, you had to add
We use it for exams.
Well,
I mean, we ask people, do you know what the Montevideo is?
okay, good for you, because you cannot use the Montevideo score with an external topometry. So just forget about the Montevideo. We never use it in France, but just forget about it.
I just remember a practitioner here was saying that one of his patients, who was very much into natural birth and so on, she came, she put all the data on the table and she said, you know, I want my birth to be 18 hours
Like this.
and something like this. And then he said, you know, I remember when I was a young trainee in the center, like in the paper, I used to do that, and I didn't know how to do it.
But it's fantastic if the patient comes and asks you to respect this. It's fantastic.
Well, it's not.
No, what?
And she didn't went into it, but she just was just discussing it.
Right.
Which is different.
If a patient has a rupture uterus, no complications are anyway
Okay, let me.
Okay.
Okay.
I
How long do you wait? How long do you wait at after 37 weeks
Yes.
before inducing on a premature rupture of membranes?
So this
Yeah.
I was.
That's your question, right?
We were doing, not having guidelines, but what we were
How long? Yeah.
Yes, not now, because now everybody's hiring me in Italy and yeah. But I'm going to tell you about classic obstetrics. Actually, if the patient was not in labor, I mean, if she was not 2-3 centimeters, we were used to wait for at least 4 hours or 6 hours then, because most of them went to labor.
Right.
But if she was like more than 6 centimeters and even then we were waiting for at least 1 hour, because most of them were also going to have normal implementation.
Because the definition of premature rupture of membranes, that means that you rupture a membrane and you don't get into labor. Most of the time it's 12 hours. Huh? That means that you wait 12 hours before calling it a premature rupture of membranes. Because if she gets into labor within these 12 hours, then it's just normal onset of labor. And then it's very different from one hospital to another, even in Paris. We're the fastest. At 12 hours we induce. But in some other hospitals they wait 2-3 days. Yeah, and I don't find it normal, because everybody puts antibiotics at 12 hours. Everybody. But in some hospitals they put the antibiotics and they wait. I don't find it very normal to put antibiotics and not to do something. So my position, it's very personal, but my position is if you're putting antibiotics because you're worried, then you induce. Because when you induce, she can spend 18 hours before delivering. It's not because you induce that she's gonna deliver right away. So but that's very personal. I'm very active at 12 hours, unless she has Streptococcus B or she has a meconium stain fluid. If she's in an active phase?
That's not so infections. We wait after rupture.
I'm not sure I get that question straight. Can you?
If the patient is in the active phase,
Yes.
more than 6 centimeters,
Yes.
and she does not have the normal frequency of infections,
Right.
you go immediately to
But-
oxytocin perfusion.
But her progression is good or not? Her dilation progression is good or not? Because if she continues to dilate, no.
And how frequently do you check?
Well, that's a very good question. I'm a bit embarrassed to answer, because we still check almost hourly. Almost. It's spacing slowly. That's the most difficult part for us, because historically it's every hour, and now it's every hour and a half, almost 2 hours. And I'm fully conscious it's too frequent. I'm fully conscious. But that's something I'm having a lot of problem changing habits. Because obstetrics is a lot of culture and a little bit of medicine. You know that. It's mostly culture.
So to put it that way, if she's at 6 centimeters and she ruptures, and even if you feel she doesn't have the progression, you wait for an hour and a half and you do a check.
Yeah.
And if there is some progression, then you don't do anything.
Exactly.
And if there is
Exactly.
no
If it progresses, we don't do anything, even if we don't record much contractions.
And when you started, it's on. Is there a standard dose that you start?
Yes, but I don't know because it's the rules.
There's a question there. ¿Alguna întrebare?
No, it was about the NICE guidelines. I read it's 24 they recommend and 48
Yeah, every country and every places has different guidelines, but the British, they're very, very, very different, because they don't screen for Streptococcus B, but on the other hand, they give more antibiotics than us. And at some point, you have to do something. Streptococcus B is absolutely terrible, So either you screen and you say I give central antibiotics only to those who are screen positive, or you give antibiotics a bit broadly. It's complicated, and they're very proud not to screen for Streptococcus B. You know?
I'm not so sure. For example, differently what you asked me.
I'm sorry?
I heard differently now. They want to introduce it again.
But they're not yet. They haven't. But they're very proud to say, you know, we're not like the United States. We don't screen and we have the same outcomes. Okay, but you do give a lot of antibiotics. Actually, I think they give more in both. More in both.
But they are not screening for several years. They used to screen before and then
They stopped.
screening.
Yeah.
Now,
I don't know, maybe I didn't see the new data, but I was with a group of doctors 2 weeks ago and they were very proud to say that they don't screen. Maybe they're going to have to screen next year, I don't know. But now, but you know, there's a difference also because now we have well, we don't use it because it's expensive, but there's a PCR. And the PCR is really good because when you screen, your screening is not very good because it's intermittent carrying. The PCR is really, really good because it tells you in labor who has and who has not Streptococcus B. So that is fantastic. And maybe the UK, they're going to switch directly from no screening to PCR. And that would make sense. I mean, we're not switching to PCR just for cost reasons. It's very expensive. Well, it's very expensive. It's expensive. For the moment, I think it's something like 30 euros. So if you do 30 euros times 2,500, it's a lot of money.
But here it's also not for free, as far as I know.
It's
In pregnancy, she still pays for it because it's free.
yes, but in most countries, whatever you do during labor is included in the labor cost. For us, we cannot charge something extra if we do it during labor. That means if we introduce Streptococcus B PCR, then we cannot charge it because it's within the labor package. And that's a trap. Because when you do it externally at 34, 38 weeks, then you charge it, of course. But once she's in labor, you cannot charge anything else. It's a trap. Very good.
So if there was
Before everybody dies of dehydration.
hypoxia,
Thank you very much.
și ca așa, întâlnire viitoare, dacă pentru agendele de toamnă, pe 20 septembrie o să înceapă Congresul Național de Cardiologie. Congresul Național de Cardiologie au o zi pre-congres în care o să fie un curs interdisciplinar pe campusul. O să fie un curs interdisciplinar cu cardiologi, geneticieni și obstetricieni, în care o să se vorbească despre, pe de o parte, femei gravide care au patologie cardiacă serioasă și care au nevoie de obstetricieni ca să le urmărească și ce se face cu ele. Pe de altă parte, o să vină niște cardiologi care cunosc foarte bine. O să vină un grup de cardiologi care cunosc foarte bine patologie familială cardiacă, care e de regulă genetică, deci familii întregi care poartă aceeași boală și o să vorbească despre asta. Acesta e profesorul fizic de la Pitie. O să vină tipul pe care poate o cunoașteți de la Târgu Mureș, pe care o cheamă Joana Gandel, care e o poloneză, care este cardiopediatru și care vorbește de malformații cardiace fetale care se descoperă în timpul sarcinii. Și o să fie românii care se ocupă de chestia asta, profesorul Coman de la Cisiliescu, profesorul Discuția. Deci e un loc bun pentru cei care vreodată s-au lovit de cazuri de genul ăsta, să se ducă la un curs de jumătate de zi și să prindă pe toți care chiar știu despre ce vorbeam de poziție. Va fi și de la Jacky Nizard acolo și este, eu cred că e miercuri, 20 septembrie. Deci asta e următoarea întâlnire. Și mulțumim că avem pe căldura asta. Mersi.